Hi, this is Heidi from Garden Crossings, and it's been a while since I've taken you for a walk through my garden. So I want to see how far we can get tonight before it gets too dark. But let's just take a walk and see what all is going on in the garden here in the beginning of March. So we're going to start off in the front of the house, and there's really not much going on here. I do need to get in there and get rid of all my Christmas decor. So that is something I might do after we're done doing the video, just to kind of un-Christmas it. And get it ready for spring. It's always weird when I'm like the last one to remove all my Christmas decorations. So in the front of the house here, we have the Bobo hydrangea, and those were trimmed last fall, so they're all nicely shaped and ready to go for the spring, for once the leaves and such start to emerge. We've got our lilac tree that we trimmed last summer because we didn't want to trim it in the fall because then we wouldn't have any blooms this year. So this will be something that has to get trimmed again after it's done flowering. You can see kind of maybe on the nubs of these branches, those are all the potential new flowers for this season. So that will be one of the first things in the garden to really give us some spring color. We've got the Anna's Magic Ball Thuyas, and those are what took the garden through the winter, giving it some color. Right now they're kind of a little bit of a brownish look to them, but that's kind of what they do in the winter. They'll get bright yellow once spring emerges and everything starts really livening up a little bit. Along the edge here, we did trimming of the hydrangea. This is the quick fire, so that was trimmed back to about 6 foot and nicely shaped. So that will be ready this spring. Along the edge of the garden here are some more Bobos. They were trimmed down to about 24 inches or so and nicely shaped up. Next we have the Bobo butterfly bush. We didn't trim that at all. So here in Michigan, which is a zone 5-6 garden, we don't trim butterfly bush in the fall because we want to see where the new growth is coming from in the spring. So sometimes if you trim them in the fall, they die back. So we just leave whatever we can on there for some winter interest. Looking into this garden here, some of the things we're seeing, those clumps of sticks, those are our hardy hibiscus. That's going to be one of the last things that actually emerge in the spring. So if I don't see anything there until end of May, beginning of June, I really don't get concerned because I know that's kind of the nature of that plant. This garden here has a lot of hydrangeas. We've got this one here is the Incredible Blush, and that was trimmed back. This is a smooth hydrangea that blooms off of the new growth. So if you haven't gotten to trim your Incredibles or your Invincibles, that can be done this spring because both of those are varieties that bloom off of the new growth. Same is true for like Bobo and Quickfire, like I've spoken of earlier here. Those also bloom off of the new growth. So if you didn't get to trimming them last fall, that's not a problem. They will continue to bloom for you this summer. I recommend that once your garden starts waking up, that if you want to get out there and get them trimmed, that would be a good time to do it. Kind of ducking around a tree here. Another plant to point out, this is a butterfly bush. This is the Lo and Behold Blue Chip. We didn't trim that back neither. We're going to wait to see where the new growth comes from there and then go ahead and trim anything that's dead where we're not seeing any new growth. This garden has some daylilies, some irises, some hellebores. Definitely I was coming out today hoping I would see some color on the hellebore, but definitely there's nothing showing here yet. So pretty much just kind of laying flat. Along the back of the house are some more hydrangeas. There's little Quickfire back there, along with Weigela Snippet Lime. Those were all trimmed and shaped last fall as well. We trimmed them back to about 18 inches. A lot of videos I've done have the Alstroemeria on it, and this is what the Alstroemeria is currently looking like. That was trimmed back last fall, so I eagerly await the return of those beautiful blooms. Under the deck here is mostly hostas in this particular garden bed. There are a couple hellebore also in this space, but right now I'm just seeing the evergreen leaves, no flowers to be seen. So typically I would expect by the end of March, maybe beginning of April or so, I should start to see some form of flower on those particular plants. We do feed the birds in the winter, and they've made quite a mess here in the yard. But that's okay because I kind of like to watch the birds. Flowers by summer and birds in the winter. My kids say I'm getting old. I'll take that as a compliment. Along the house here, we have the Invincible, I think these are the Limettas or the wee white hydrangeas. So these are hydrangeas that are, again, blooming off of the new growth, so they can be trimmed in the fall or in the spring. These have been trimmed down to about 18 inches or so, so they're all ready to go for the spring as well. It's a little hard to tell what's what in the garden right now because everything is still pretty dormant. Looks like our neighbor's trash has definitely collected in the garden, so we'll have to get out here and do some garden cleanup just to get rid of trash and any plants that we haven't trimmed back, or plants that we want trimmed back more. We'll get out here and do so. We've got some daylilies down here in the front bed. They're pretty much still sleeping. We've got the beautiful ornamental grass there. That is the Miscanthus Morning Light. And I do like to leave the grass up for the winter because it does add a lot of cool interest in the winter. So like when the wind is blowing and these little grass tufts or whatever are blowing in the breeze, I think that's really quite a pretty look. So let's take a look at that. So when we get ready to remove this, what I'm going to do is tie a rope around the bottom of the plant and then take a hedge trimmer and trim it down. So by tying a rope around the grass, it keeps them all kind of tucked together. So that way it's easy for garden cleanup. You just have this big bunch all roped together and easily thrown into the garbage. These hydrangeas here, these are the Tough Stuff hydrangeas, and these bloom off of the new growth. Let's scratch that. These bloom off of the old growth, so you do not want to really trim these in the fall or in the spring. So last summer, after they were done flowering, they have started to set their buds for this coming year. So if we go in closer, you can see the buds are there, and that's going to be the flower for this year. Sometimes if we have a really hard winter, those buds will die off. But this year it looks like they made it through the winter really well. So we should be seeing some really pretty flowers here on the Tough Stuff hydrangea this year. We'll head out back to the butterfly garden and see actually before we do that, let's head over to the circle garden and just see what's going on there. So this is really the time of year where the grass is not looking great. Actually, nothing looks great this time of year. Maybe a couple evergreens look okay, but it's such a sad difference between the winter and the super early spring than what it is in the summer. So that's one of the beauties too, I think, of gardening is it's really quite rewarding to watch the garden wake up. There's nothing more rewarding, I don't think, than when things just start to green and you start seeing all these buds and then the beautiful blooms. It's new life, and I think that's really wonderful. So in this garden here, we have the dwarf bloomerang lilacs. This is the dwarf bloomerang pink, and these are about 3 foot tall or so. These are a pretty mature plant, so that's a pretty good indication of the size specimen that they are when they get full grown. Down there is the My Monet Wagila, and that was trimmed last summer, trimmed back to about 18 inches or so. The Atlas roses also were trimmed back in the fall, and they are about 18 to 20 inches right now as well. In the middle there, we have a standard limelight hydrangea tree. So that we trimmed back. We trimmed about a third of that plant back just to keep it nice and compact. One thing I am noticing is that last summer the winds or whatever kind of made it get crooked. So we'll have to see what we can do about putting some sort of a stake or something to get that tree growing straight again. So it's really pretty though, having that nice specimen in the middle, kind of like the thriller to this particular garden. Now we'll head out to the butterfly garden and see what's going on out there. So the wind has definitely taken a few of my things and given them a little bit of a tilt. So I'll have to come out and straighten some of these things up. This particular area here in this fenced in area, this is all coneflowers, and the fence is to keep rabbits away, although a rabbit could jump over that fence if they wanted to. So it's kind of more just for looks, to be honest. We've got the bobo hydrangeas. These were all trimmed up in the fall. These were trimmed up to about 4 foot or so. This is a Miss Molly butterfly bush. We kept this tall, so this will get trimmed back as well. Looks like I have some daffodils that have kind of sprouted through the ground. So that's kind of exciting to see some of the bulbs that are out here showing a little bit of life. Here's another bobo hydrangea. I take some of my garden clunder in the winter. Others of it I leave out. I do like how some of the garden clunder kind of gives a bright splash of color, especially when it's snowy here in Michigan. Some of the things I'm afraid might break, those we bring in for protection. This here in front of us is the Weigela Sonic Bloom Pink. This is about 3 foot tall and about 4 foot wide. And that I really had them give a good trim to last year. That was getting pretty large, and I just really wanted to dial it back. So we took about a half off of that plant, just to get it back into the size that I was hoping for it to be. This is a reblooming Weigela, so this will bloom up to 3, maybe even 4 cycles throughout the summer. The Sonic Bloom series is a great rebloomer and gives you color all summer long. In this garden bed, there are Veronica, Salvia, Asclepias, phlox. There is some hardy hibiscus, delphinium, and echinacea, all some of the favorite butterfly attracting plants. Nothing really to show right now. Pretty much everything is just kind of brown. This is the Firelight hydrangea. This we trimmed up a little bit last year. It's about 5, maybe 6 foot tall right now. I just had them trim just the flowers off the tips, so we didn't take a lot of size off of this plant, and we left a few flowers on for winter interest, and those will get trimmed off this spring. And again, not needing to worry about, trimming it in the spring and not having flowers. Firelight is a hardy hydrangea, which blooms off of the new growth. So trimming in the spring is not an issue with the Firelight hydrangea. We'll head back to the Hosta corner and see what's going on back here. I anticipate nothing. Looks like we've had a little trees down this winter, a couple branches laying on the ground there. So that's on my neighbor's side. We'll see if he cuts that up or what will happen with that. In the Hosta bed, though, there looks like there's kind of a mess back here. Like a lot of branches have come off this tree this year and fallen on the ground. So I'm not seeing any new growth here of the Hosta. We do like to leave the pine needles down because that does create kind of a nice barrier, helps with slugs a little bit. Last year, we had all the gardens mulched. We did kind of a brown or black mulch, and we had them put on a pretty thick layer because it's obviously not something we want done every year because it's quite a project to do. But definitely the mulch has stayed and looks excellent. So we won't need to do it again this year for sure. And possibly even we'll get 3 years out of it. So sometimes doing a little extra thick layer helps make things last longer so that you don't have to continue to mulch every single year. Especially in gardens this size, it is a huge project. We were fortunate enough to get it blown in last summer or spring. So we had it done for us because this would have taken us a month of Sundays just to get this project done, especially by wheeling it by a wheelbarrow up from the front of the house. In this particular area of the garden, we kind of exit the Hosta area and head into a little bit more sunnier plants. There's some corabels or heuchera in this area, along with some alstroemeria. There's a couple hellebores back there behind the yellow bench. You can see the evergreen foliage there. No signs of flowers yet, so hopefully the next video I do, which will probably be in another month because there's not a whole lot going on here, Hopefully we'll see some color by then. This area here, there's some roses, some hydrangeas, there's some phlox, daylilies. Up in the back there's a small little rhododendron that is not going to bloom this year because the deer have eaten all the buds off of it. So we planted those before we knew we had deer here. The last year or two, all of a sudden we started noticing deer tracks up here along the garden. On the other side, there's a creek back there, so they just kind of follow the creek, I guess. There's a muck field behind us, so I don't know if they hang out in the muck field, but we definitely have been seeing more deer activity in the last couple years. Oh, here's one shrub. It's not doing much yet, but this is the Pieris. This is Interstella. That's really cool, evergreen shrub, and that gets these little white berries on it and beautiful flowers. So we'll have to watch that and see if that will be berrying here anytime soon. Along the tree, there's some daylilies and some heuchera. Really not a lot going on there. This area is a lot of daylilies, some lavender. Hibiscus are in the back. That is the incredible blush hibiscus. Those have been trimmed back to about 2 to 3 foot. So those are ready to go for this coming spring. The pond is absolutely disgusting, filled with leaves. So that will have to get cleaned out. On either side of the shed there are little lime hydrangeas. They've been trimmed back to about 4 foot. In the very back there, we put limelight hydrangeas, and that was done to kind of make a divider between our yard and the neighbor's yard. So in the summer, it's a really pretty just wall of white flowers back there. In this garden here, there's some hibiscus, some daylilies, and some phlox. This here's the incredible hydrangea that was trimmed back to about 3 foot, and it's about 4 foot wide. Here's a bobo hydrangea. That one was trimmed back to 3 foot. Looks like the wind took the trellises down, so I'll have to get those propped back up. We've got clematis that grows on those, so that gives us kind of some height. But as long as it stays windy, they just keep blowing over. So I'll leave them over until I start seeing new growth. Here is a Invincible Spirit hydrangea, cut back to about 2.5 foot. We have spirea, and that's been cut back to 2 foot or so. Here's a grouping of Allium Millennium. They were trimmed back to about 8 inches, although they can go back even further when we come in and start doing spring cleanup. And I'm looking here really close, and I am seeing some new growth in there for the allium. So they're starting to wake up a little bit. Another spirea. This is the Proudberry bush. This was a great bush all winter long with the beautiful pink berries. The pink berries are now gone. There's some brown there. So they've kind of dried up. So this we will trim when we come in and do the spring cleanup. Trim it back to probably about 3 foot or so. The Proudberry is a great winter interest shrub. We've got a hibiscus there that was trimmed back. The trellis here has clematis on it. And these clematis have all been trimmed back to 8 inches or so. One thing to point out with the clematis, this is what I do. Doesn't mean this is what everyone else does. But I typically do trim all my clematis back in the fall. And that's because in the spring, we don't have a lot of time to do it. But also, I don't like all that dead stuff up on my trellis. So they always bloom for me every year. I know a lot of people worry about, is it prune group 1, 2, or 3? And there definitely is something, to say for that. But me personally, I trim all mine back, let them come back in the spring. And usually I'll get a second flush of flowers later on in the season. This here is Weigela Wine and Roses. And that will need to get trimmed after it's done flowering. And this beautiful specimen here is the limelight hydrangea, and that is probably about 8 foot tall right now. This garden here was planted last spring. It did okay last summer, but I'm hoping it really fills out a lot more this spring. So I'm eager to see what this area will do next spring. We're going to head up to the front. I think there's a beautiful sunset, so we'll end with some color. I would like to say that if you are new to Garden Crossings and haven't subscribed yet to our YouTube channel, I do invite you to do that. We usually post 2 to 3 videos a week, and in the winter it gives you inspiration, and in the summer it gives you ideas. We're going to head up and over the hill. Oh, it's kind of hidden, but there's a little peak of color to close out this video. This is Heidi from Garden Crossings.